So, colleague, welcome to this. Is a kind of e-college that we have begun and in 2022, and I remember that Michael was with us also for the e-college. In this case, we are presenting a book, his book. You know, there is here is the version Fast Track, and Dark Deals. It's an important opera that can open our eyes on some thing that usually we are not used to follow. My experience as a journalist that has followed the Olympics in the 70s of the last century, there was not so much interest in what was the advertising around the Olympic Games. And my first impression, very bad, was in 1980. Before that, Michael entered in the world of the IOC, no? In the Olympic Games in Lake Placid. That I think that they were the worst organized of ever, but you know, the feeling was very, very strange because at that moment, IOC was sinking. Everybody was thinking that the IOC was already finished, and in Lake Placid, there was the announcement of the first boycott for Moscow also. So everything very different, very difficult. But after, thanks to the boycott, the Olympic movement not only has survived, but has known a new life. And I must say that if IOC has survived, is also because all the journalists in the world and all the people in the world was against the politics in sport. So the Olympic in Moscow and the Olympics after in Los Angeles was the one that were more followed in television, and many countries has had the possibility to win gold medal or medal. So the interest is grown in all around the world. In some way, the boycott was a gift to the Olympic movement that was dying. Now, I was completely dying, I can tell you, because I was there in Lake Placid. If you would be in Lake Placid, you understand that the moment nobody couldn't believe anymore. Because, for example, our press center, we were in a school, and there was the video, the television video in black and white, but there was also a problem that they show only the image, but there was no graphic. So we couldn't understand exactly what was the timing and the result. And after, there was no transportation. Because only in the second week they sent the buses from New York, because it was impossible to go from a venue to another. So I think that after that moment, the situation is changed. And I think that you, Michael, you have lived the part of the resurrection of IOC, even in the marketing. And you have told in your book exactly what happened in the year between 1980 and 1984. And after the struggle that you have to defend the image. So now, when came to you the idea of this book? Why?
Well, Gianni, thank you for the very kind introduction. I've not been on the Olympic scene quite as long as you. So Sarajevo, 84 was my very first Olympic Games. And recently I was looking at how the industry of sports business had evolved. And the more I researched it, I realized that nobody had written a history looking at how the industry evolved from the 1970s, when it really began, through to today. You know, an industry that frankly didn't exist in terms of television and sponsorship in the 70s, and today represents literally trillions of dollars. Equally, nobody had written any biography of the key founders like Mark McCormack from IMG, Horst Dassler from Adidas. And I thought, this is an incredibly important history. And because I've been privileged to be in the industry from when it first started, I thought, well, let's see what can be written. And the book, published a few weeks ago, documents the history, the personalities, and how the industry came about. It was quite a roller coaster. Obviously, tell the story through the Olympics, but in my early days, I was also working on FIFA. Interestingly, in the 70s, to put into context, when FIFA through West Nally began their very first marketing, I think FIFA had a total number of 4 employees, 4 employees and a dog, and you compare it to where it's ended up today. I also spent more than a decade with Bernie Ecclestone as his right hand with Formula One. So it's the story of the business of sport and how it came about, the characters and personalities behind it, the deals, which in the 80s and 90s really was the Wild West, how we created the strategy, the top program, the IOC's Worldwide Marketing Program, where when we first launched it, nobody thought it would succeed. None of the companies wanted to sign up because they said, well, you don't have advertising at the Olympics. We were caught right up in the middle of the Cold War between the Americans and the Soviets, with the Americans saying, we don't want to have our sponsorship money being given to the communists so they can steal our gold medals. And the Soviet bloc saying, we're not sure it's a good idea to have more money going to the West because we'll then have to increase our budgets. And so it was a real roller coaster challenge, not just from a commercial standpoint, but from a political standpoint, to put it all together. And there are many commentators who say that if we had not been successful, a very big question mark as to whether the Olympic Games would be there today. So it's great, a weekend from Milano to sort of see the world coming back together. I think it's great to see the Winter Olympics back in the Alps. And Gianni, ready to take questions, talk further. You've had a chance to sort of plow through the book and see some of the colorful stories in there. And over the coming months, we'll be looking forward to bring out other language editions of the book.
Yes, for sure. I think that now, waiting that the people begin to ask the questions, there is also Belisa. If you want to begin to open the question, Belisa from Portugal.
Thank you very much. My question is, given your role in creating the top program and the current intense competition from streaming service and social media, what is the single biggest strategic move to IOC must make to ensure the Olympic Games remain culturally and commercially relevant to the next generation of fans?
That's a great question. You will see, and anybody who would like copies of the book, let Gianni know and we'll make arrangements. The very final chapter of the book says, right, I hope you've enjoyed this journey over 50 years. What's going to happen for the next 50 years? How is sport going to evolve? Whether it's on the media front, in terms of how will sports bodies connect and engage with their fans, whether it's on the sponsorship, who will be the future broadcasters. I think all of us can acknowledge and recognize that we are at a moment of incredible change and the pace of change. And I think critically important for the IOC to understand how fast the market is changing and to continue to evolve and adjust. From the sponsorship program, the top program is probably the most successful, certainly sports marketing program, if not marketing program there's ever been. It is more than 40 years old. The principles are still very strong, but the IOC has to urgently evolve the evolution and development of the top program, because the way companies are engaging with today in their marketing is totally different from a decade ago. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges is how do you make sure you're engaging with the next generation? Because the next, the younger generation, my own kids, they don't sit in front of a television for hours at a time. They take their content in very short, sharp pieces from social media. And when you sit down with university students and you talk about the Olympics, the values, what it means, it probably resonates with them as powerfully as it's ever done with a generation. But is the IOC, and for that matter, other sports bodies, are they engaging and delivering the content in a way that the next generation wants to receive? I'm not sure. Things like the Olympic Channel, that's had a very big investment in, has not been successful in reaching the audiences. And so the IOC's got to look at how it partners with broadcasters, and in the future, who will those broadcasters be? Currently, the athletes at the games are not allowed to post on social media their performance. I think this is crazy, because the athletes have some of the biggest followings on social media. If you want to protect your broadcaster, you can have a 24-hour window, but after that, you should be encouraging the athletes to be reaching out with their peers and giving them access to be able to show their performance. I think the IOC is moving far too slowly on this field. They announced last week that finally, for Beijing, athletes competing in Beijing 4 years ago, they can now get access to their competition performance. Well, the technology is there today to allow the athletes already today. Imagine whether it's Lindsey Vonn, Michaela Schifrin, being able to engage and talk about their performance with their video performance 24 hours after they've competed. That's what's going to happen. Sorry,
Okay.
maybe a little bit of a long-winded answer. My apologies, but hopefully you've got a few interesting headlines and insights in there.
No, the important is that you are very clear, because this 24-hour window it will be difficult to be accepted very soon, because they are a little old-fashioned minded, no? But I'm sure that they have to study something completely new, because the young generation, as you said, they don't stay 2 hours in front of the television to follow an event. Maybe that they will stay 10 minutes for the last part, but not for the beginning. And this is a problem. And now we go to Thibault.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. Do you hear me well?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, we hear you clearly.
Thank you. Hi, Michael. I wanted to ask you about the marketing made by the Enhanced Games. How do you analyze their marketing? How do you think if it's a good marketing, a good communication?
The enhanced games.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think there's a big question mark. Are they going to even happen? Secondly, if you look at, you have to ask yourself, what are they trying to achieve? Is it related to sports performance, or is it a cover for a broader evolution of the future of drugs and extension of lifespan? I make the point in the book that, once I completely disagree with enhanced games from a sporting standpoint, because I think the athletes have to be protected. You cannot go back to the era, say, of East Germany with state-managed steroid programs. And you look at what's happened to a whole generation who have been medically impacted or died young. But the point I also make in the book is that I believe currently, in terms of doping, we are in the prehistoric age. When you're still talking about drugs and steroids, if you look at what is coming down, what is already there in terms of mechanical enhancements, how far away are we from the day where the athlete is inside his body, got electrodes stimulating the muscles, and it's not going to be about the technology you wear, it's the technology that you have inside your body. And on that, how far away are we from the day where every athlete's got to walk through a metal detector to see what's inside him? You already have it in cycling. You're already looking in, whether there are batteries hidden inside of the bicycle. And this is going to be a massive issue for the sports regulators in the future to decide what is natural, what is artificial. If you're born with a defect and surgery is able to correct that defect, but then 20 years on, when you're an athlete, is giving you a significant enhancement, where do you draw the line? So I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenges for sports leadership, to evolve the doping protocols of what is fair play, what is natural, how do you manage the evolution of technology and science. The enhanced games, I think, is a complete distraction in that debate.
Thank you.
But regarding the enhanced games, I can tell you that I went to visit their website, and looking to their website, you can understand what is their policy, because especially behind the enhanced game, there are also pharmaceutical company that they are producing pills that they said that will make your life longer. But we know that the pill of the long life are not so easy to receive or to find. Is a kind of dream of the human that has always thought that there is a possibility to have a longer life. But they are trying with their drugs even to destroy the body of many athletes. Because if you go to see, there is a video in which there is the swimmer that has gained a lot of kilos of muscles to try to earn 1 million, making the world record of the 50 meters indoors. Sorry, I have to close my phone. And looking at that, you can understand exactly what is the plan of these enhanced games. That there is nothing to do with sport, but is something is a bad evolution of the sport of the future, exactly as the gladiator in the Colosseum, something similar. And I hope that they will have no success, and I hope also, as Michael said, that for now there is not a marketing program on it, only from the pharmaceutical company that are behind the project. Belisa, you're still asking again. Go ahead. The microphone.
Okay. From your perspective, what is the single most underestimated strategic decision that shaped the modern Olympic brand, and why do you think most people still fail to understand its impact?
Oof. I think when people watching the Olympic Games, they realize it's special. They realize maybe it's different, but they can't always put their finger on why. Something that I fought hard for was to keep a clean venue, to not have advertising inside the venues. If you go and speak to people, most of them say, well, there's advertising at the Olympics. And you say, not inside the venue. And they say, yes, there is. And you say, look at the video, look at the TV. And they would then suddenly go, actually, you know what? It's different. I hadn't realized, I hadn't appreciated. So there are aspects of the the Olympic brand and what makes it special that are fundamental to keeping it special, but the public may not top of mind realize. I think the IOC needs to do more about the promotion of the Olympic brand. Years ago, they used to run a campaign called Celebrate Humanity, which was a series of television spots talking about the Olympic values. And I still think to this day that was by far the best campaign presenting the Olympic values. And maybe at times it's become too, some of the process has become too legal, and one has lost sight of what it is that really is making the Olympics special.
There is Thibaut. Again, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yes, speaking about values, I wanted to ask you, Michael, how could sport avoid losing its values regarding the evolution of the marketing, but also the use of social networks, AI, also big data, maybe?
Well, you're hitting me with some good questions, everybody. Well, AI is transforming everything. And I get into quite a lot of detail in the book about its potential impact and where it's positive and where it carries risk. I think the starting point has got to be ensuring that the next generation of the youth want to continue to practice sport. And this was something which the IOC, the former president Jacques Rogge, addressed, and the original vision was correct, that you have to get the kids, children being active, not just sitting on the couch, watching television or playing esports. The strategy that the IOC pursued with the Youth Olympic Games, I think, was a failed strategy, because nobody watches the Youth Olympic Games. It has zero media coverage. And if it has zero media coverage, how is it, motivating the next generation to connect and engage? What I think the IOC needs to do as a leader of the sports movement in the world is engage with the world's governments to ensure that sport is part of the curriculum, that sport in some ways becomes sort of a basic human right, that every child learns to read, write, speak, count, and one should add sport on there of play, because of the values that you learn from sport, from fair play, from rules, from being on a team. It is remarkable how many countries around the world do not have sport as part of their school curriculum or education. And I think that's where you got to start. And, if the IOC put as much effort into engaging with the political leadership about getting sport onto the curriculum, versus worrying about trying to stage a Youth Olympic Games that costs them a lot of money, is a serious distraction in time, I think the resources, the return on that investment would be much stronger.
Thank you.
Mark, you have the word. The microphone.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to ask a question just related to something you said a bit earlier. You said about the changing media landscape, and you mentioned how your children, Michael, much like mine, consume media in such a different way, and obviously the preponderance of social media. And those of us who come from a traditional media background don't really know where the industry is going. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on where's the industry going? Are we going to be TikToking in the next 10 years? Or are we still going to be writing stories, do you think? We're still going to be commentating on sports events? What's your short-term prognosis for the media world?
I had I was going to say, distressing exchange this morning with one of your colleagues from the Washington Post as to whether the Washington Post was sending any journalists to Milano or not. At the moment, they are still sending, although they're wondering whether they're going to get their redundancy notice in the middle of the games. And if you look at the the traditional media platforms, how they have been scaling back, and sport, well, the media platform in its own right, having less of a reach than it used to. I think there are various commentators saying, "Oh, the Winter Olympic Games are declining. How much longer will they survive?" I think people will be surprised by the audience ratings that we will see from Milano. I think in terms of the TV audience, the social media impact, the importance of storytelling, which the print media and the great journalists within the print media are at the forefront. It's not just a question of talking about results, but it is there will always be, I think, a great need for great storytelling. And that, I think, is going to be that'll be part of the future, I think, of the non-visual media. But TikTok, all of the social media channels are going to play an increasingly important role. And the challenge for the rights holder is, how do they give each of these platforms, how do you put the jigsaw puzzle together? Because you've got the big network saying, no, I've got the exclusive rights. But if you don't find a solution to give short, sharp clips, you're going to disenfranchise a whole significant portion of the audience. So that's going to be one of the challenges. I also, in the book, talk about who will be the future broadcaster. Is it the current broadcast channels and networks that we know? Is it going to be the technical companies like Apple and Amazon that are sort of sitting on the fence and every now and then dipping their toe into the water? Is it going to be some company we've never heard of? Or is it going to be somebody who we all know very well, who is already around us all the time? And that is the athlete. And the athlete has complete control over their content as it relates to their lifestyle. And there's for the followers, you've got an athlete on Instagram with hundreds of millions of followers out telling their story. They have a bigger reach than the TV channels. And the moment they're allowed access to also include their sporting performance as a complement to their whole lifestyle, this is happening. It's just the challenge is going to be, how do you knit it all together? And how does each of the channels monetize their investment?
Okay, we go to Nigeria. Taiwo.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the explanation about the media because my question is actually focused on media rights. You just said something about the that you can't predict the future of the media rights of the Olympics and also of what sports. So, knowing that we can't predict sports, what way, what do you think should be? Because definitely, when you can't predict something, then you are leaving it open. Do you think if we continue in this trajectory with American companies like Paramount, like Amazon, like Netflix, dominating the media rights of major sports events, do you think it's going to pose harm to other regions like the Europe, like Africa, like Asia? Do you think the competition is not enough from other regions of the world?
Well, I think if you are the sports leader, you have a responsibility to make sure that everybody can watch your event. And if you're going with the new technology players, you have to sort of understand how is your event or program going to be distributed, and what barriers are going to be put in the way of being able to follow the event. Some of the big events like the Olympics insist that the primary coverage is on free to air so that everybody can watch it. And even when an agreement is made with, say, like Warner Brothers or some commercial network, they are contractually obliged to sublicense a number of hours for free to air coverage. I think if a sport doesn't pay attention to making sure that its content is readily accessible and available, it will lose its prestige. That for a period of time happened with Wimbledon tennis when they started taking the big check over coverage. And Wimbledon, certainly within Europe, for a period of time, lost a lot of its prestige. So the balancing act is, how do you continue to monetize and generate the revenue? But it cannot be at the cost of ensuring you have the maximum audience. And if you're looking to develop, maybe you have a sport that doesn't have a strong reach in Africa or India, but the potential is there, then again, the sports body should be looking to work with partners and potentially underwrite the cost of production or broadcast to make sure you've got customized feeds that are really customized to that market and audience.
Okay, now we go to Ashish.
Hi, Michael. Can you?
I hear you. We hear you loud and clear.
Sorry?
Perfect.
Super. Michael, I finally started to get around to starting to read the book, and it is an incredibly engaging read. You really are a wonderful storyteller. You know, we've talked in the past a lot about the business side and the people that were very important in that. But it's very clear in the book as well that from the sporting side, you've met practically everyone in the world of sport from A to Z. I just wondered which sports person, because you yourself, of course, have a sporting background, which sports personality impressed you the most that you've met through all your dealings, be it through the business side of it or perhaps the actual sporting side of it? You know, who have you admired? I know it's a hard one.
That's an impossible question, Ashish, to answer, because I've been privileged to meet so many great, sportsmen. You have the legends like Pele, but you also then have, other athletes who may not be household names, but use their, in this case, Olympic notoriety to launch social programs. So you take somebody like Johan Olaf Koss, the speed skater from the Lillehammer Games, and how he launched a worldwide movement providing sport facility and support for disadvantaged children. And you see more and more sports superstars using their fame to create foundations to engage and reach out. So, very difficult to honestly to try and split names. I mean, I grew up, and tried to be a competitive skier. I wasn't a very good one. I was a lot more successful at negotiating sponsorships than I was at winning the competitions. But when I was growing up, Jean-Claude Killy, the triple gold medalist from Grenoble was the hero. So you'll have your heroes, from the sport you're passionate about. You will have, other, heroes because of, their humanity, their what they've achieved.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a good read.
So now,
Thank you for the plug.
yes, from Sweden.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for speaking to us. I wonder, some people were surprised when Kirsty Coventry was voted president for the IOC. I wonder about your reaction, and do you think there will be a change with Mrs. Coventry in charge?
Well, I think first of all, you look back at every single IOC president has put their mark one way or the other on the presidency. When Jacques Rogge took over from Samaranch in 2000, his presidency, and his objectives were very different. Similarly, when Bach took over from Rogge. And I think Coventry, in her early days, has shown that she will again be very different from her predecessors. I think the hands are probably initially a little bit full in ensuring the successful delivery of Milano. And probably only next summer will we really see how Coventry, brings together the priorities that she sees are critically important for the movement. So far she's sort of coming across as very, very open, is presenting a sort of new mindset, and I think probably will be recalibrating the focus very much to the Olympic Games. I think, under the Bach era, there was a lot of outreach to the UN, the various UN bodies, and that played an important role. It was fundamental in the relationship with the World Health Organization to ensure the Olympic Games could take place in 2021 and 22. But was there some slippage? Take, for example, the sustainability and environment. Should the IOC have a sustainability program? Absolutely. Should the Olympic Games, where possible, be a great showcase for best practice sustainability? Absolutely. But does planting trees around the world and creating an Olympic forests, is that actually core to the IOC's mission? I'm not sure. And so I think, there probably will be a sort of recalibration. I think also one's got to have a long, hard look at how the administration has evolved. I left the IOC and I think the headcount was around 250. Today, the headcount is well over 1,000. And, every organization, every company is sort of grows, evolves, and you need to take stock and, make sure you're focused on your core mission, on your priorities, potentially change the culture, I think it's very difficult when you're running a sort of a global organization not to let it slip into a global bureaucracy. And I remember, again, under Samaranch, it was easier for me to go and spend $1 million than to hire a single person, because Samaranch didn't want the headcount to grow and therefore become a bureaucracy. I think there needs to be some serious recalibration there. And let's see, after the Milano Games, when Coventry's sort of will have been there a year, have time to take stock and how she sees as her priorities.
So in your opinion, has it become too big? Too many people?
Yes.
Very, very clear, eh? Exactly. It's a big circus. Now, Dana, it's your time.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Michael, for having us. So my question is with regards to challenges. In Michael's initial submission, he mentioned about how if they inculcated sports into student curriculum, where students are given the opportunity to add sports like how they add math and English and speaking and other things. So I was wondering, it goes beyond just adding it to the curriculum because it goes through the government. So how easy or difficult is it going to be for the IOC to go through the local committees like I'm in Ghana, so I'll say the Ghana Olympic Committee, through to the government where it's going to be feasible to make sure growing at the Junior Olympics is going to be something like accessible to all. Thank you.
I think that has to depend on each country, where in some markets you will have a very strong National Olympic Committee, and the president of the National Olympic Committee might even be the sports minister. You will have other countries where the IOC may be better served in talking directly to the government leadership. And the IOC, when the IOC president travels and visits, is received by the by the heads of state. And if you look at all governments are facing a major health care challenge. The population is getting older. The population may be getting less healthy. And the cost of the medical health services in every country is exploding. The investment in sport should not be seen as a cost. It should be seen as a saving in terms of how you can reduce healthcare costs and other programs elsewhere. And I think it's perhaps one of the biggest untapped potential in terms of where the IOC should be at the forefront in terms of driving that debate. But the National Olympic Committees all can play a very important role. Some are de facto sports ministries and are well placed to pioneer, change. Others don't have the resources or the connections.
Okay. Another question for the floor. If not, I have to talk with Michael, because reading the book, for example, we were in Atlanta, but we have not the same feeling that you have had. It was a little bit disaster for us for other things, transportation and everything. But for you was a fight to survive in the future for the marketing, or not? Atlanta.
Well, people will see in the book I'm not very kind or complimentary about the Atlanta Games. From a sporting standpoint, they were great. The organizing committee was very well intentioned and well meaning, but they were sabotaged by the very narrow political agenda of the mayor of Atlanta, who had no respect to the media world and made your life even more difficult, even from petty things like, transport in terms of not letting the buses stop outside the main press center, through to the arrogance of IBM, who insisted that their technology system was perfect when a year out from the games we said, we're worried, we're concerned. For the first time, the wire agencies, the APs, the Reuters were saying, something here is not working. And we went to Lou Gerstner, the chairman of IBM, and said, look, we're a little bit worried. And we're told to run along. What do we know about technology? And don't second guess the Americans. The whole system collapsed. With the diktat from Samaranch to me afterwards was re-engineer the whole structure and make sure that never happens again. The marketing, in part because of the mayor, Bill Campbell, they tried to turn it into a commercial flea market, which completely distorted from the Olympic brand. In some ways, it was good that so many things were so screwed up and so bad, because in that way we had everybody's attention going forward as to how to fix things for the future, right down to security and the whole dynamic with the bombing in Atlanta Park. So a lot of good things came out of Atlanta, because when I then sat down with the Sydney organizers or the Athens organizers, you had immediately fresh to mind, the problems of Atlanta, the worldwide media criticism that was completely justified, and it allowed us to recalibrate the whole sort of Olympic presentation. And I hope, we'll never see, a repeat again of the problems that we saw in Atlanta.
Let's hope. Thibaut, again.
I thought there is a question from Rodrigo in the chat, maybe because I already asked two, so if you want. No? Okay.
I can read that question so
Okay,
that
yes,
I will read the Rodrigo's question. How important is transmedia for Olympics and F1 as films, games, and TV series? That was Rodrigo's question.
How important is transmedia, was it?
Yes, transmedia for Olympics and Formula One.
Are we talking about things like the Formula One Drive to Survive series, these programs or documentaries around the competition?
Yes, it says films, games, and TV series.
I think very important, because it's all about storytelling. In Formula One, the more you created the characters, the more that people were able to relate, they were interested in. And I think people want to understand the personalities, the characters. If you don't have the same connection or engagement. And so that's why that's why the US network and others invest so much time in introducing the personalities and characters. The Formula One Drive to Survive has been a massive contribution to growing the Formula One audience around the world, because they're not just interested on the field of play. They also want to understand what's happening around the field of play. The lifestyle, Formula One Drive to Survive, some of the conflict between the managers and the teams. It's the storytelling. Now, a lot of sports have tried to copy Drive to Survive with mixed success, because maybe it was a bad production team, or the story wasn't curated in the right way. But storytelling is key, and the sports bodies. I'm also the chairman of World Volleyball, the commercial arm of volleyball and the joint venture with CVC. we're looking at how do you grow the sport through storytelling. And the more the public understand the athletes, the profile, their characters. You go to Turkey, where women's volleyball is incredibly strong, in part because the women's volleyball players have become the leading sports personalities of their generation. So, short answer to your question is very important. But you've then got to make sure you have the right partners helping to pull that content together.
Now we go to Takafumi. Belisa, wait a moment because it's the first time that you make a question. Go ahead, Yoshida.
Thank you. Hello, Michael. This is Takafumi Yoshida from Kyodo News.
Good evening, Kyoto.
Good evening. Yes. Yeah. I have a question about Milano Cortina Olympic will be the first widespread games in history, I think. But this strategy is about reducing costs. But do you think this will be the game changer for sustainable Winter Olympics?
How do I answer that without getting into a lot of trouble? Let me put the context. I think, one, it is great to see the games back in the Alps. I think it's important that the IOC, in awarding the host cities, finds a balance between opening up new markets and respecting the traditional markets. So having 3 consecutive winter games in new markets, Sochi, Pyeongchang, Beijing, frankly, was not a good thing, because you need to find the balance. It was great to go to Beijing and open up and have 200 or 300 million new winter sports users, but you got to find a balance between going to the new and, respecting your heritage and roots. To the extent that they're saying the spread out solution is saving money, I'm not sure. It's one thing to use existing facilities, and there the IOC is absolutely right to say they don't want to have lots of new facilities built, that they then become white elephants, and either use existing facilities, or if there is a real legacy need, build new, otherwise make it temporary. I think the Milano Cortina games were going to look stunning on television. I think they are going to be very, very challenged for all of us on the ground to move around, because you can't have the ice sports in one venue and all of the other sports a minimum 5 hours away. And to go from one set of skiing to another set of skiing, it's another 4 hours. I think
not 4 hours. You don't know the geography of Italy, eh? It's 7 hours.
But what's Livigno to Cortina going to be?
4 hours, yes.
Okay.
But go from Bormio to Cortina, it's between 5 and 7 hours. It depends by the traffic.
So, to what extent are you losing something in terms of the soul, the heart of the Olympics all being together? To what extent did it have to be that spread out, or was it a local political decision of wanting to share throughout the different communes? And I think there probably will be quite a lot of reflection after the games as to, did that work in terms of the Olympic operations? On television, great. But, a games where the skiers will never meet the ice sport, where the people on the ground can't interact or engage with. Individually, you'll have a great atmosphere in Cortina, in Livigno, but I think even looking, I've seen one or two comments from leadership of the IOC to say, let's reflect and see, how this all made sense. But the argument to say this is reducing cost, that doesn't make sense. Because if you've got a venue where you have all the alpine skiing together, as opposed to splitting it in two, why does it have to be split in two? You've got ski resorts that you could easily have all of the alpine and all of the freestyle together. And the next games in 2030, you have, what is it, the ice sports in Nice and the skiing in Val d'Isère, just as spread out. I think it was too rushed. I think the local politics had too much influence. Maybe at the time the IOC is saying, well, we didn't have a lot of choice. True, but the bidding process, I think, is now coming back strong, and you've got a lot of interest for the future. But in an ideal world, you don't want it so spread out.
Yes. Now we go to Michael Schuen. First question.
Yes, hello, Michael. I don't
Michael.
know if you remember me. We had contact back in the days with Salzburg, like 25 years ago or something like that. My question is,
Both been around a long time.
yeah, it's been a long time. My question is, you talked a little bit about tradition now and the Olympic Games. If you take a look at the sports program, we've seen it in the summer already with a slight change and bringing in new sports, but also having a look at the Winter Games and having a look at the duration of the games in this 17 days. And I don't know, I've read you said 10,000 hours of program kind of. How how do you see the future of the sports program? Is there a need also in winter to bring in new things and maybe have traditional ones out of the games, or is it as it is and you should stick with the tradition of all the sports in the Olympic Winter Games?
Well, I think you're going to have a very different debate here if you're looking at winter versus summer. I think the evolution of the winter program, go back to, I think, compared to Sarajevo now, I think is probably 3 times more events than Sarajevo.
Yes.
And the winter sports program has had a lot more flexibility to bring on new, young, edgier sports. From snowboarding to the freestyle to the ski cross. Now in Cortina, we're going to see the alpinism. And I think the winter program is in, a very good place. And the way they've introduced recently Big Air and other, I mean, it's a very edgy, dynamic program. What I wouldn't agree with is suddenly trying to bring summer sports into the winter program. I know 1 or 2 people are talking about that. I think that would fundamentally change the winter brand dynamic. I think you would then make bidding more complicated because you would need more indoor venues, and you would reduce the number of winter communities that could hope to host. Are you going to see continued evolution where you have things like the extreme skiing on the world tour? Quite possibly. On the summer program, there you've got a bigger challenge because it can't keep growing. And I think Los Angeles has added 6 new sports to the program. And how do you find the balance between respecting heritage and yet evolving and bringing new sports onto the program? I mean, one of the stories I deal with in the book is the evolution of modern pentathlon, because somehow I got myself cornered by the honorary president of modern pentathlon, Prince Albert, saying, we need your help. And I said, to do what? He said, to save the sport. And I said, well, good luck. It's a lost cause. You know, the IOC has said no. Los Angeles has said no. So, I mean, I'm sorry that the sport's heading to the Olympic Museum. Anyway, the Serene Highness wouldn't let me out of his office until I agreed to help, and sat down with the federation and basically said, look, the only way out of this is if you drop the horses and replace them with ninja warriors. And you've now got obstacle in LA, and it might be a success. But I think Coventry has been very clear and correct to say there are no sacred cows. Everything has got to be looked at. I think it's important that in the course of looking at it, you don't throw heritage out the window. That, you know, your DNA, the authenticity where you've come from is important. But you can't just hang your coat on, well, I was founded by the Coubertins, so that gives me my birthright to still be at the Olympics. Look at what happened with the sport of wrestling. They refused to listen to the IOC about the needed changes and evolution of the sport, so the IOC dropped the sport from the program. Suddenly, massive wake-up call, and wrestling, you know, made the changes that the IOC had requested, and, you know, with Nenad Lalovic, the new president, reformed the sport and got it to a great place. So again, important lesson to the sports leaders of, you know, don't take things for granted. Don't keep looking from where you've come from, but be very clear on where you need to go.
Okay, now Littorin again, because the other two guys have already two questions. Open the microphone, Littorin.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on your discussion about the Cortina game, Milano Cortina Games. Sweden has actually bid for the Winter Games 9 times and were denied again in 2030. I want the conclusion from the Swedish Olympic Committee is that the Northern European market is too small to host the games for the IOC. I wonder if you would agree on that.
Short answer, no, I don't agree. Expanded on that. For me, the Lillehammer Games certainly are my favorite Winter Olympic Games. They were something unique and incredible, in part because winter sport forms such a key part of the Norwegian DNA, as it would in Sweden. I had a fairly, what would be the term, a fairly frank and open exchange with, should we say, some of the IOC leadership a few weeks ago about this bidding process. And I said, guys, if you had put Lillehammer through the meat grinder that you now have to go through with all of the guarantees and undertakings, Lillehammer would never have bid. And you would have lost what clearly was a phenomenal Winter Olympic Games. So that you can't sit in ivory tower in Lausanne and have a whole load of lawyers checking boxes. And I'm not going to name countries here because that's going to land me in real trouble. But, you know, you can have a bid from one country where whether they've issued the guarantees or not, you know full well they will deliver. You can have a bid from another country with all sorts of guarantees, and you know equally full well the guarantees are not worth the paper they're written on. So I think it's the Winter Games are certainly not so big that the Scandinavian, the Nordic countries can't aspire to host them. And I think, the IOC has to continue to be flexible, that maybe one's got a very strong bid that doesn't have a bob and lose run. Well, you're certainly not going to force the host to go and build one. So in that case, you stage the bob and luge in another country. But I am sure if you were to sit in the IOC hotel bar in Milano and you're having a drink with some of the IOC members, they will be reflecting, did we really throw Stockholm out? Not to be critical of Italy, but the challenges of a very spread out games. But I mean, then again, in Sweden, your Alpine events would have been an hour's flight away, but it would have still been more compact. So I hope that there will be clearer strategic vision, not compromised by an overly zealous legal process.
Thank you.
Yeah, after I did that, Stockholm was 2 times when Italy was bidding, no? The first time when Torino won, but Sweden was with Finland in that case, if you remember. The bid was double. And the people were only worried about the flight in the winter. That sometimes can be cancelled and for so this was not the word ready, because I think that the bid was quite good personally. And this time I was surprised because I spoke also with some colleagues, Swedish colleagues, and but Sweden was not so eager towards the games. It looks, so that some of your colleagues told me, because Italy even was not so eager. So I think that was a choice, the less dangerous in some way. But in Italy, we have seen Milano will be okay. The center is big. The situation, I think that at the end will be fine. But the distance between the venue is very big. And somebody, for example, Michael Schuen knows that if he stay in Cortina, he cannot go to Borbio to see the downhill man, for example. It's impossible because he will not be back. Yes, he can be back to Cortina for the next morning, but he has to travel all night long. And I think that is not so easy. Or you have your own car, or with the transportation that can be for free for journalists, there is not enough time. This is the problem. This is quite But now let's go to Belisa again. Belisa, go ahead. And after we have the last question of Thibaut. Belisa?
Hello. What would a truly climate-aligned Olympic Games look like if you removed all legacy constraints and redesigned the model from zero?
Forgive me, Belisa, I'm not sure I'm following clearly the question. Is it
It's about
how could you make the Olympic Games more sustainable?
Yes.
And
if is resigned and from the model from zero.
Well, I think
what would
I mean, if you take it to one extreme, you wouldn't then have all the athletes from flying in from around the world. You wouldn't have the media flying in from around the world.
Is it possible?
No. I think since the Lillehammer Games in '94, the IOC has continued to evolve and explore what would be best practice, from construction of venues, from management of waste, from from some aspects of travel and training. But I mean, let's also be clear, it's not the Olympic Games' role to solve the world's environmental problems, but they can show and shine a spotlight on new thinking, new ideas, innovation. But you can't go from one extreme to the other.
The first step.
I think they've already taken the first step, which has made sustainability a very important part of the whole presentation. It's a key component of the host city or communities when they are building new facilities, that they look to build their new facilities with the best possible environmental sustainability guidelines.
Okay, Thibaut.
Yeah, thank you. Just my final question. It was you spoke, sorry, a little bit about volleyball, but I wanted to ask you, which sport organization do you think are building the best marketing today?
No, you mean aside from volleyball? I think I think Formula One is in a very strong place. It took Liberty a few years to understand what they'd acquired, but I think they are now in a very, very good place. I have always admired what India did with the IPL and the merger of cricket and Bollywood entertainment, and how they created such a very, very strong new league and concept. I think the tennis world is making, important steps forward. I don't comment about football because I think football operates in its own ecosystem. Interesting to see what will happen now with basketball and the NBA coming to Europe. I think, you've got some of these leagues which have access to the resources, the creative thinking, the business and production talent to really grow the presentations of their sport. But great question, and I think one continuing to sort of to carefully watch.
Thank you.
Gianni, I've got 5 more minutes before I've got a hard stop.
Yes, I think that was the last question.
We have questions in the chat, Michael, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's this one from Carolina from Argentina. She says, thank you, Michael, for your time and clarity. You mentioned earlier that, especially at the Youth Olympic Games, there isn't enough media coverage to amplify the message. I believe that many journalists, especially young and freelance ones, face barriers to access, mainly financial and related to accreditation. Is there any strategy or program that the IOC has in mind or could develop based on this, perhaps as a collaborative effort?
I don't know. I think your president Gianni may be better placed to comment on that, because I know, there have been programs about young reporters and to try and help cultivate the next generation of media and reporters. But at the end of the day, the Youth Olympic Games doesn't have the profile and oxygen that the mainstream media is covering it. And therefore, you've got great athletic performances. It's a great test case for the future, but nobody knows about it.
Do you have time for another one from Lydia?
Sure.
Okay, she's asking, we might agree or disagree that AI is closing some gaps with regards to storytelling, but does it do it better than the traditional media?
I think AI is very well placed to facilitate the reporting of results. But nothing is going to replace real creative writing and storytelling that that you as journalists, when you're writing the review of the Milano Games as to why was it magical, why was it special, AI is not going to be there on the ground to actually feel it, to have that human engagement and interaction. So I think one's got to understand where AI, in the case of media, can make a constructive contribution. My earlier comment about letting the athletes have access to their video images, AI would play a very important role in the speed and management of that. But then the telling of the story, that should be your world.
This is what we hope, but AI will stolen our article of the day, and the day after they can write of the magic of the Olympics. This is the problem. The problem is the crime that they're doing is a different matter, this one. We can talk about the next time we will meet together, because I think that everybody has found very interesting this meeting with you, Michael. I thank you for your time. I hope that all the colleagues agree with me that was very interesting. Guys, what do you think?
Yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah,
Well,
very nice.
listen, great to meet you all, to meet some of you again. If you are in Milan, I hope that we'll have a chance to meet up, and in between the 5-hour journey between Milan and the Alps, can get a chance to have a coffee or catch up. But no, thank you very much, and hopefully my remarks, sometimes perhaps a bit too colorful, will probably land me in deep trouble with the IOC communications department. But hopefully there is some interesting themes and content there.
Michael, I think that perhaps we can have another meeting after the Olympics, no? Perhaps in March, where we can see what happened in Milano Cortina, that is a new situation, and also to look what new can be also in the future of the marketing, but also of the history of the Olympic Games. So thank you, and see you soon in Milano, okay?
Thank you next week, Jenny,
Thank
and
you.
thank you very much to everybody for joining in. I hope it was interesting and great questions, giving me a hard time to think through all of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, see you soon. To everybody, when
See you
you
soon.
request, we are here to talk with you. Thank you. Ciao.